Hello and welcome to the Sound Up Seattle podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Seattle and Washington sports. I'm your host, Tyler Cartwright, and today I am not joined by my co-host, John Carey. He is on vacation, and it is my job to fulfill both his humor and his excitement for the Gonzaga Bulldogs. So today we are going to run through a lot of Seahawks, a lot of Washington football, Washington basketball. We've got Gonzaga, we've got Wazoo football, we've got Kraken, we've got everything. And so with that being said, I'm going to jump right into it. Don't worry, I've got his value dogs in my notebook as well. I checked in with him. So with all that being said, here is a little Coyote picnic. All right, folks. First things first, let's talk Seattle Seahawks. Last week, they had a bye, which was needed after what was a bit of a trouncing. Not as trouncing, but a bit of what felt like the Seahawks needing to regroup. They lost to the Rams 26-20 in overtime, but that game felt like it was out of hand because of Geno's interceptions, the turnovers that were created by the Rams defense, and the Seahawks just kind of inability to capitalize on what was an amazing Jackson Smith and Jigba game. And so this upcoming week on Sunday, they play the San Francisco 49ers. What does that mean for the Seahawks? It means that they have not won a game against the 49ers since 2021, and that is not looking great. It means Kyle Shanahan has had this team's number for the last few years, including the 2022 season where the Seahawks went to the playoffs, everything like that. So what I want to do is break down what's been going on with the Seahawks team. Why are they underperforming? Where are the parts of their game that they can improve before diving into this bit of a scary 49ers game where they could end up being where the Seahawks could end up being 4-6 and looking at what is a long upward climb towards a potential playoff spot if they're able to win against the Cardinals and the Jets. And then I believe the Cardinals again. So they need to win 3 of these next 4 games, I think, to keep their playoff hopes alive. If they go 2-2, looking at this conference, looking at the rest of their season, it would be kind of wraps. So the Cardinals and Jets will be nice tests to see where this team really stacks up against the lesser teams with lesser talent. We'll say the 49ers are a scary team. We're not expected to win by any means. I think ESPN has us rated at approximately a 30% chance to win. So it's looking rough, but let's break down what's going on with this team. The Seahawks, last week we talked the Seahawks penalty problems, and those, nothing's changed in terms of their penalties per game. They're still top 3 in both offensive and defensive penalties per game. So we don't need to touch on that more. That's still a problem that the coaching needed to address, and we'll hopefully see that in this game against the 49ers. What I want to talk about a little bit more is the Seahawks' inability really to stop the rush. You look at this team's rushing defense. They're kind of a middling defense overall, kind of bottom 16, bottom half of the NFL, and a lot of that comes from a pretty poor rushing defense. The Seahawks allow 139.4 rushing yards per game at the moment. That is 7th worst in the NFL, and that's among the likes of the Carolina Panthers, the Dallas Cowboys, the Indianapolis Colts, as much as John would hate me saying that. The New York Giants, the Commanders are up there, but they have an explosive offense that the Seahawks just don't have. And then you've got teams like the Saints, the Jets, the Bears, the Patriots even, and these teams are not, playoff caliber teams. Everybody who follows the NFL knows that those teams are not going to the playoffs. The Seahawks' hopes of making the playoffs need to be improved by getting stellar linebacker and defensive line play, which can start helping their rushing defense. Now, we've talked a lot about the injuries that have derailed this team, looking at Byron Murphy and Leonard Williams being out. We need Ernest Jones to have a big game. And that acquisition from the Titans was very big, and we will hope to see him continue. His first game back, I think he had 15 tackles. Like, we need to see him perform as well as he did in that first game with the Hawks, and just perform as well as they can, because they don't allow a ton of touchdowns necessarily in terms of rushing touchdowns per game and situations like that. You saw them hold Kyron Williams. They were not, they're kind of a good bend, don't break defense. But when you look at this team as a whole, their rushing defense is what allows the opposing offenses to stay on the field for long stretches of time and be unable to stop the big chunk plays. You think about the last time we played the 49ers, a lot of those yards came from either dumps and screens and things of that nature, or they're just breaking through, finding holes in our defensive line and able to bust out for seven yards a carry instead of holding them to 2 or tackling them in the backfield. And so these issues really, really come up when you look at the Seahawks rushing defense statistics over the course of the whole season. Again, they only allow 1 touchdown, and really what it is, the Seahawks defense has been capable in the red zone. The reason that they've been in so many games is because they hold teams to less touchdowns on a statistical basis than average. But it's still just not enough. The Seahawks need to be able to stay on the field and produce offense in that way to keep their defense from having to deal with rushing the entire game. And that gets into another side of the football. Offensively, the Seahawks do not rush the ball enough. They are, I think, bottom 5 in rushing attempts per game. And we saw in the Rams game, they were unable to get any sort of momentum going. Granted, that Rams defensive line is pretty stout, but they've been unable to do it against the Bills, against the Rams, and we will see if they're able to do it against this 49ers team. But with DK being questionable, they might turn more to Kenneth Walker. They might try to turn more to JSN. It doesn't matter. If this team is unable to establish the run game, and I know everybody says this is kind of the cliche. They say, oh, you don't actually have to do that anymore. You do. You have to do that. And it's not necessarily establishing the run game, but it's showing that you can run the football for more than a half yard a carry. Kenneth Walker is a great running back, but this Seahawks offensive line has been unable to create any attacking opportunities. And Geno Smith and Kenneth Walker have had to rely on the screen passes that Ryan Grubb orchestrates. And that just hasn't been enough, as crappy as that is to say. So that gets into my next point. Again, I'm ready to go off the rails on this team. I want to talk red zone conversions. Now, looking at or not even red zone conversions, just kind of conversions in general. If you look at Pro Football Reference, you look at where the Seahawks are in terms of opportunities in the red zone, conversion rates, and then you look at third down conversions and things of that nature. Just how are they doing in higher pressure situations? And what I want to say, gosh, I've been holding this water for 45 seconds. Give me a second. What I want to touch on is the Seahawks have the 4th fewest red zone attempts in all of the NFL. They are smack in the middle of, again, the Cowboys, the Raiders, the Bears, the Browns, these teams that are unable to convert every single week. And we see it. These are at least bottom 10. You could maybe talk yourselves into the Cowboys being a bottom 8 team, and they're kind of the highest caliber along with the Bears. And these teams are just not good. The Bears, you see it with Caleb Williams, his struggling offensive line, and his inability to get rid of the football. The Seahawks are lucky that they have a quarterback in Geno Smith who has been able to bail out their offensive line and do the things that he does. He's been a really great quarterback, all things considered. So I have to give my props to Geno Smith. The more you look at the stats and how this team has performed, I don't think it's on Geno. I think it's on the line. I think it's on injuries. And I think what it really is the schematics offensively mean that this team is so feast or famine. And that comes down to this team cannot run the football. This team is unable to run the football. And so what happens with that is they're so feast or famine because they have 23 red zone attempts on the season, which again, you look at, I was talking about the Commanders offense. The Commanders have 44 red zone attempts on the season and 24 red zone touchdowns. They have more red zone touchdowns than we have red zone attempts. So you look at those two teams and that's the comparison. That's why the Commanders can have such a poor run defense. So moving in that direction, the Seahawks actually convert pretty well once they can get to the red zone. And I think that's where the issue lies. You look at their number of red zone touchdowns, and they only have 12, but that's a 52% red zone conversion rate. And you think the rest of the time, I guess we'll get to the next part. That's a 52% conversion rate. And generally that's pretty good. You know, if the Seahawks can get there, they should be able to score. And this team just is so feast or famine offensively. It creates this kind of negative feedback loop of like, hey, if this team cannot get it going offensively, then the defense is on the field for longer stretches of time. And then it just kind of progresses into a cycle of the later in the game. And you see this in their statistics of, you know, between the first and the fourth quarter where the teams are kind of on the back end of the game or on the front end of the game, the defense performs better early. And the later the game gets, they've been in the game for so long that it really can create issues for the defense, and they just get tired. You get worn down, and the rushing attack really can perform well later into the game. We know everybody talks about that as like kind of an unreal thing, but you know, Derrick Henry gets most of his rushing touchdowns in the latter halves of the game after Lamar Jackson has tired out these defenses for 2.5 quarters. You know. So it's something that the Seahawks need to work on. I'm not a football guru. I'm not sure how they address it. I'm looking at the statistics and breaking down this information. So the next thing that I want to touch on, I said, hey, they're converting in red zone touchdowns at 52% of the time. That for sure, obviously, means that they have converted, at least 80% of the of 11 times that they didn't convert into field goals. And that is where some of the other issues lie in this Seahawks approach. Maybe it's the analytics department, maybe it's the coaching staff. I don't know what it is. But the Seahawks, let me pull up this stat because it is crazy. The Seahawks have, here we go. The Seahawks have attempted 15 field goals on the season. They've attempted 15 field goals on the season. You compare that is bottom 6 again in the NFL. And you compare that to a team like the 49ers, like the Texans, the Commanders. Those are teams in the 20s, teams upper 20s, low 30s. Those teams kick field goals. They take the field goals that they can get. They take the points that they can get. And you look at this Seahawks team and you're like, man, what is their deal? Why are they not doing that? And it's because I think they have too much trust in their team in the red zone. Maybe they don't trust, is it Jason Myers? They don't trust Jason Myers. I know it's Myers. They've kicked 2 field goals within 20 yards, or within 20 to 29 yards, and they haven't kicked a field goal within 19 yards. So within 29 yards of the field goal post, they've kicked 2 field goals. Like I want you to take that into consideration. When this team gets in the red zone, they don't kick field goals. They go for it basically every time. And so with that comes a loss of, you think about this team's been in the red zone 23 times. They've kicked 2 field goals. They've scored on 12 of those. That's 9 trips to the red zone that were completely unsuccessful. And that is just too high of a number. This team is not efficient enough to assume that they can get those 4th and 1s. You know, they're not the Eagles. They're not a team like the Ravens who can kind of run around with Lamar or Derrick Henry. This is a team that needs to take points when they can get them and turn themselves into a 24 points per game scorer instead of an 18 or 19 points per game scorer. So that is just one of just a few, sorry, not one. That is just a few of the issues that, looking at the statistics for this team, looking at where their problems lie, I'm just trying to figure out what's going on. And obviously a lot of it comes from the penalties. You know, they can get in the red zone and then have, get backed out. We've seen that the last couple of weeks with errant snaps from the center or Geno tripping on the center's leg, things like that. Those are mishaps that should be fixed. But at the end of the day, this team needs to perform better, both in the red zone and offensively, so that their rushing defense and their defense in general isn't on the field for 35, 40 minutes a game. It needs to be way more balanced. I would love for this offense to be able to be on the field for 35 minutes a game, but it just doesn't happen. So, taking all of that information, looking at the upcoming 49ers game, which is so scary. The Seahawks are currently plus 6.5. The over-under is 49.5. And we don't know if DK Metcalf is going to be playing. And obviously the 49ers have Christian McCaffrey back. He's, a little limited, I would assume, but they have Christian McCaffrey back. And this team, the 49ers are rounding into form. The Seahawks need this win. They don't need it, but they, need it in the sense of like, if they're going to be competitive and try and get to that kind of 9-win mark that we think the playoffs are going to be, they need this game, because if they were to go 4-6, it's such an uphill climb. I look at this game, I look at how the 49ers have performed over the last few weeks. They won against Tampa Bay 23-20. They won against Dallas 30-24. They lost to Kansas City 28-18. Those 3 games were after we played them and lost to them 36-24 on a breakaway. I think the Seahawks can hang with the 49ers. I think the 49ers they seem like a beast because we haven't beat them in 3 years, but I think the Seahawks have the potential to hang with them. And if they can get, 1 or 2 great plays from DK, from Geno Smith to JSN, from Kenneth Walker, if they can get some breakout plays, that can happen. This offense has not necessarily been designed to do that without DK. And so if he is unavailable, that would be very concerning for me. But I think it's possible. Do I think it's going to happen? No. Would I take the Seahawks at money line in a bet? I would not. I don't think this game is going to work in the Seahawks' favor. But maybe John or I have them in a value dog. You never know. I'm looking at this game and I see a similar score that we saw last time, but I think it's going to be a little bit more high octane offense for the Seahawks. And I see it being maybe a 34-28 type game. That's what I see. I don't think it's going to be a defensive battle. Both of these teams' defenses are either a little older or a little battered and still figuring themselves out. Granted, second times teams play, so this is the second time they've played this season. Usually that means less points because defenses have seen them once before. So we will see what happens. But for now, I either think it's going to be high octane, high scoring, or it's going to be a rock fight in that sense of, maybe it's a 20-14 game. Either way, that plus 6.5 is interesting. We'll see when we get to value dogs if one of us does take it.